I'm done with you. Just like that. On Valentine's Day. In front of everyone. Valentine's Day 2024. Frank T. Elliott ended 3 years with Patricia Cline loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. I'm ending this tonight so you never forget losing me. Every head turned. She went still. He leaned back, satisfied. Let me tell you what happened next. Patricia's hands were trembling as she adjusted the collar of her navy blazer. 3 years. 3 Valentine's days. And tonight, something felt different, heavier in the best way. She'd caught a glimpse of a small box in Frank's coat pocket that morning. Just a flash. But her heart hadn't settled since. The restaurant was exactly what love stories were made of. Rose petals fanned across white linen. Candles caught the gold in every wine glass. Around them, couples leaned close, laughing softly, like the world had shrunk to just 2 people at a time. Frank reached across and refilled her glass. You look good tonight, he said. Thank you. She smiled, her fingers curling around the stem. This place is perfect. He smiled back. But something moved behind his eyes, quick and cold, there and gone before she could name it. Patricia. His voice shifted. We need to talk. Her breath caught. This is it. 3 years of building something real. She straightened slightly, heartful, ready. I've been thinking, he continued, his voice already climbing, not for her, for the room. About us. About where this is going. Me too, she whispered. Good. He set down his glass. Then you'll understand. This isn't working. I'm done. The music didn't stop. But everything else did. What? We're over. Louder now. Deliberate. I'm breaking up with you. Tonight. On Valentine's Day. Heads turned. Whispers rippled. And Frank T. Elliott sat back in his chair with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had planned every word. He had no idea who was sitting at the next table. Patricia didn't move. Not when the whispers started. Not when a woman 2 tables over pressed her hand to her mouth. Not when Frank stood, buttoned his jacket with slow, deliberate fingers, and said, "Take care of yourself," the way you'd say it to someone you'd already forgotten. She stared at the rose petal nearest her plate. Red. Perfectly placed. A prop in someone else's love story. The chair scraped as Frank left. His cologne lingered a half-second longer than he did one final insult. That's when she felt it. A soft pressure near her hand. A white handkerchief. Folded. Crisp. Placed without a word. She looked up. The man at the next table wasn't watching her the way the others were, with pity, or worse, entertainment. He was watching her the way someone watches a person they already respect. Calm eyes. A quiet jaw. He wore his suit the way men wear something they've never had to think about. I'm sorry you had to experience that, he said simply. No performance in it. Just the words. Patricia took the handkerchief. Her throat was too tight to answer. He glanced once toward the door Frank had disappeared through, the briefest look, and something shifted in his expression. Not anger exactly. More like the quiet certainty of a man watching someone make the worst mistake of his life and knowing it. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He returned to his dinner. She sat in the wreckage of hers. She didn't know his name. Didn't know that half the city answered to him. Didn't know that the hand that offered her a handkerchief on the worst night of her life would one day hold hers at the altar. She only knew one thing. Someone had seen her. Really seen her. And for now, that was enough to breathe. The first therapy session, Patricia cried for 40 minutes straight and said almost nothing. Her therapist, Dr. Reeves, didn't push. She just handed over a box of tissues and let the silence do what silence does, hold space for things too heavy to carry alone. Patricia went back the following week. And the week after that. It didn't feel like healing at first. It felt like excavation. Digging through layers of small moments she'd explained away, the dismissive comments dressed as jokes, the canceled plans she'd never been given real reasons for, the slow, steady way Frank had made her feel like loving her was a burden he was graciously carrying. She started running in March. Not because anyone told her to. Because one morning at 5 a.m., the apartment felt like it was closing in, and she needed somewhere to put all that restless, angry energy. The cold air hit her face, and she ran until her lungs burned and her thoughts finally went quiet. By April, she was at the gym 3 times a week. By June, she'd taken on 2 new client accounts at work, accounts her manager had quietly been saving for someone ready to step up. Patricia was ready. She stopped waiting for Frank to realize what he'd lost. That hope, once the last thing she blew out at night like a candle, simply stopped relighting. What replaced it was quieter, steadier. She started noticing her own laugh again. Started cooking meals she actually liked. Started sitting with herself at dinner without feeling the absence of someone else. She wasn't becoming someone new. She was remembering who she'd been before Frank convinced her that version wasn't worth keeping. And she was done apologizing for her. She almost didn't go. The invitation had sat on her desk for 2 weeks, a fundraiser hosted by Williams Global, one of her agency's biggest accounts. Her manager had asked her to represent the firm. Professional obligation. Nothing more. Patricia wore burgundy. Not because she was trying to make an impression. Because it was the first dress she'd bought entirely for herself, without wondering what Frank would think of it. The ballroom was the kind of room that reminded you how large the world was. Crystal chandeliers. The low hum of important conversations. Waitstaff moving like current through a river, silent and purposeful. She was reaching for a glass of sparkling water when she heard the voice. "You look like someone who actually belongs here." She turned. And there he was. It took her a second, the same calm eyes, the same unhurried presence. He looked exactly like a man who had never needed a room to notice him, because he'd long stopped needing that kind of thing. "The handkerchief," she said softly, before she could stop herself. Something warm moved across his face. Not surprise. More like quiet satisfaction, the way you feel when something you hoped for actually happens. "I wasn't sure you'd remember," Donald said. "I kept it," she admitted. He paused at that. Just a beat. But she caught it. They talked for 20 minutes that somehow felt like 5. He asked about her work, not the polished elevator pitch version, but the real version. What she loved about it. What frustrated her. He listened the way very few people actually listen, not waiting for his turn to speak, but genuinely receiving what she said. When someone pulled him away, he turned back once. "I hope we talk again, Patricia." She realized she already hoped the same thing. He texted 3 days later. Not that night. Not the next morning. 3 days, enough time that it didn't feel like urgency, but not so long it felt like indifference. She would learn later that was simply how Donald moved through the world. Deliberately. Without performance. "There's a coffee place near the waterfront. No agenda. Just conversation if you're open to it." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then typed back, "I'm open to it." The coffee place was small and unhurried, the kind that didn't have its name in neon. They sat by the window and watched the water move while the morning built itself slowly around them. Donald asked her about her dreams. Not her 5-year plan. Not her brand strategy or her client portfolio. Her dreams, the ones she'd quietly folded up and tucked away somewhere safe, because life had taught her they were too fragile to leave out in the open. She told him about the consultancy she'd always wanted to build. Something of her own. He didn't nod politely and change the subject. He leaned forward slightly and asked what was stopping her. Nobody had ever asked her that. She felt something loosen in her chest, some old tension she'd carried so long she'd stopped noticing its weight. They met again the following week. Then the week after. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became long walks that neither of them wanted to end. He never rushed her. Never made her feel like she was being measured against something. With Frank, she had always been auditioning. With Donald, she was simply herself. Fully. Without editing. One evening, walking back along the waterfront, he reached for her hand. She let him take it. and something that had been very quiet inside her finally, gently, came back to life. He proposed on New Year's Eve. Not at a restaurant. Not in front of a crowd. On the rooftop of his apartment, with the city spread out below them like something borrowed from a dream, and a bottle of wine they'd barely touched, and no one watching but the sky. Patricia had been laughing at something he said when he went quiet. She turned to find him looking at her with an expression she didn't have a word for yet, something beyond love, something that had been tested and chosen and was still choosing. He didn't make a speech. He said, "I knew the night I met you that Frank Elliott was the biggest fool I'd ever seen." A small smile. "And I knew if you'd let me, I'd spend a long time proving the opposite was possible." He opened the box. Simple. Brilliant. Exactly her. Patricia Klein. His voice steady, certain. "Will you let me?" She didn't cry the way she thought she might. She just looked at him, this man who had handed her a handkerchief when she was broken, who had asked about her dreams before he ever asked for anything else, who had never once made her feel like loving her required patience or sacrifice. "Yes," she said. Quietly. Like it was the easiest thing she'd ever met. The city erupted below them as midnight arrived. Fireworks bled color across the dark sky. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her close, and she pressed her face briefly against his shoulder and thought, this is what it was always supposed to feel like. She walked into the new year as Patricia Williams, leaving behind every version of herself that had ever believed she deserved less. The city lit up like it knew. Frank T. Elliott had landed the job of a lifetime. Williams Global. 6 figures. Corner office trajectory. The kind of position people spent entire careers chasing. He'd told everyone who'd listen, his parents, his old college buddies, the bartender at his usual spot. He walked into the lobby on his first day with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted he deserved to be there. The building was glass and steel and ambition. Everything felt polished, expensive, intentional. A young HR rep met him at the security desk with a tablet and a rehearsed smile. "Welcome to Williams Global, Mr. Elliott." Frank adjusted his tie, took the visitor badge, and followed her toward the elevator bank. That's when he saw it. The photo. Massive. Mounted on the wall across from reception like a piece of art. A portrait of the company's leadership. And there, standing beside Donald Williams himself, wearing a charcoal blazer and a calm, assured smile. "Patricia." Frank stopped walking. The HR rep glanced back. "Mr. Elliott?" He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. His brain was scrambling, trying to rewrite what his eyes were telling him. Who is that?" His voice came out wrong. Too tight. The rep followed his gaze and smiled brightly. "Oh, that's Mrs. Williams. Patricia Williams. She's our chief strategy advisor and the CEO's wife. Brilliant woman. You'll likely meet her during your onboarding." The floor tilted. Mrs. Williams. Patricia. His Patricia. No, not his. Not anymore. The woman he'd humiliated in front of a crowded restaurant. The woman he'd told to never forget losing him. She was married to Donald Williams, his new boss. The HR rep was still talking, gesturing toward the elevator, but Frank didn't hear a word. He just stared at that portrait, at Patricia's face, calm and untouchable, and felt the ground fall out from under him. The knock came 2 days later. Patricia was reviewing acquisition reports when her assistant stepped in. "Mrs. Williams, the new senior analyst is here for his introductory meeting." She didn't look up immediately. "Send him in." The door opened, and Frank T. Elliott walked into her office. She watched it happen in real time, the color draining from his face, the sharp intake of breath, the way his hand tightened around the leather portfolio he was carrying like it might keep him upright. Patricia set down her pen. Slowly. She let the silence stretch just long enough to matter. "Mr. Elliott." Her voice was calm, professional, the kind of tone that left no room for nostalgia. "Please have a seat." He didn't move at first. Just stood there, drowning in the reality of where he was. who was sitting across from him. Frank. She said it softer this time. Not cruel. Just factual. Sit down. He sat. She leaned back slightly, hands folded on the desk. The ring on her finger caught the light, brilliant, deliberate, impossible to miss. I understand you'll be working under the strategy division, she continued evenly. That means you'll report to me on quarterly assessments. I expect thorough work. Attention to detail. Accountability. Frank's mouth opened. Closed. No sound came out. Patricia stood and extended her hand across the desk. He stared at it like it might burn him. Welcome to Williams Global, Mr. Elliott. He rose on unsteady legs and took her hand. His palm was damp. Hers was steady. She held his gaze for just a beat longer than necessary, not out of cruelty, but out of something quieter. Something that looked a lot like closure. I'm sure you'll do well here, she said. And she meant it. Because his opinion of her no longer mattered. The Williams Global Valentine's Gala was the kind of event that made headlines. Every executive, every board member, clients, investors, press. The ballroom glittered with ambition and champagne, and at the center of it all stood Donald Williams, one hand resting gently on the small of his wife's back. Patricia wore emerald green. Radiant. Untouchable. Frank stood near the back with the other mid-level employees, nursing a drink he couldn't taste, praying the night would end without incident. Then Donald took the microphone. Good evening, he began, and the room quieted instantly. Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to speak about someone very important to me. Patricia glanced up at him, surprised. He smiled down at her, warm, private, then turned back to the crowd. Exactly 1 year ago tonight, I watched a man publicly humiliate the woman standing beside me. He broke up with her in a crowded restaurant, loud enough for everyone to hear. He wanted her to remember losing him. The room went still. Frank's stomach dropped. Donald's voice didn't rise. He didn't need it to. And I'm grateful to him. Because his cruelty created the space for something real. His stupidity gave me the greatest gift of my life. He turned to Patricia, his hand finding hers. You didn't need saving that night. You just needed to be seen. And I've spent every day since learning what an honor it is to stand beside you. The applause was instant. Thunderous. Patricia's eyes shone, but she didn't look away from Donald. She didn't need to. Frank stood frozen in the back, the weight of 100 eyes on him, the truth settling into his bones like ice. He'd wanted her to remember losing him. Instead, she'd forgotten him entirely. Frank tried to quit 3 times in the first month. Each time, pride pulled him back. Or maybe it was cowardice. He didn't know anymore. He saw her in the hallways, at meetings, in briefings where she spoke with the kind of quiet authority people listen to without being told. She never acknowledged what had happened between them. Never brought it up. Never needed to. That was somehow worse. He'd expected her to gloat. To make him pay in 1,000 small, public humiliations. But Patricia didn't operate like that. She was just, above him. In every measurable way. And Frank rotted in it. At night, alone in his expensive apartment that felt like a waiting room, he scrolled through old photos. Her laugh. Her hand in his. The version of her that had looked at him like he mattered. He'd convinced himself she needed him. That breaking her publicly would prove he held the power. But standing in that ballroom, watching Donald Williams hold her like she was the axis the world turned on, Frank finally understood. He'd never had power over her. He'd just been cruel enough to make her believe she was small. 6 months later, Patricia saw him in the lobby, hunched over his phone, looking older than he should. She could have walked past. She almost did. Instead, she stopped. Frank. He looked up, startled. Afraid, maybe. She didn't smile. But her voice was soft. I hope you find what you're looking for. She meant it. Not because he deserved her kindness, but because holding on to his cruelty would only make her carry something that was never hers to begin with. She walked away. And this time, Frank didn't try to follow. He just stood there, watching her disappear into a life he'd never be part of, realizing too late that some things, once destroyed, don't come back. Not even for regret.